Hi, my name is John, and this is a story.
They're strange, aren't they? They're children.
There's two ways to convey information visually. The first one is composition.
Compared to normal people.
What's in the frame, and what's not. There's something funny about things entering the frame abruptly.
Correct.
It's true.
Christopher Nolan creates a joke when Tom Hardy dreams a rocket launcher out of frame.
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
And then brings it into frame. But I think Nolan does it better here, where he sets up this joke.
March him out of here with a gun in his back.
A gun? Why would I have a gun?
Must be his. I don't think they'd let someone like me carry a gun.
Fucking hope not.
And then pays it off later. But Nolan's best composition is seen in The Prestige, where he not only has to orientate us through all the timelines, he has to manipulate our feelings for the two main characters. Nolan does both with a very simple tracking shot.
Are you watching closely?
We get a medium shot of Borden, looking to the right, and then cut to Angier, looking up. Starting the shot on Borden helps us sympathize with him. We're watching this scene play out through his eyes. And where are his eyes looking? They're looking toward Angier. But where does Angier look? Toward God. When we get a further flashback of the two men,
We were two young men at the start of a great career.
Nolan orientates us by mirroring the shot. Again, we get a medium shot of Borden, but this time the shot finds Angier. They're both looking to the right, and this shot connects these two characters, whereas the opening scene created a division between them with a cut. And when Nolan wants us to sympathize with Angier, he starts the shot like this.
Which of you brave souls is willing
But this type of composition isn't typical in Nolan's films. In fact, his films tend to be devoid of any thoughtful composition. Film critic Armand White calls his films
gobbledygook. I don't find that kind of composition, an admirable compositional sense in Nolan's work, and I certainly never find rhythm in his work.
And in this video essay, Jim Emerson is very critical of Nolan's composition in The Dark Knight.
A bit disoriented. We're cutting away to these flat, static shots that seem to be floating in a vacuum. What we could really use right now is a simple interior two-shot. The imprecision of Nolan's camera placement creates some much more serious logistical problems later.
We know that Nolan can design composition on a shot-by-shot level, he just chooses not to.
There are other filmmakers who approach it from a purely visual point of view, where they would just create very dense visuals that would sustain multiple viewings because you'd sort of see more in the frame. And I chose to take the path of incorporating that desire for a layered approach into the narrative itself, into the story, if you like. And so I've made films that have some ambiguity to them or some layering to them narratively.
So without composition, Nolan has two options to convey information. One is visual, and the other is dialogue.
One of these bullets is like us, traveling forwards through time. The other one's going backwards.
If you can steal an idea from someone's
Can you tell which is which?
can't you plant one there?
control then space like this?
Turn here.
I would talk more about Nolan's exposition, but there really isn't much to say.
Something I'll address once I have tenure, but for now...
Okay, so Nolan doesn't do composition, take away his dialogue. How can he convey information to us? Well, the only thing left is cutting. Some type of magic happens when you juxtapose two different images and let the audience figure out the connection. This groundbreaking video is from Lev Kuleshov. When this short film premiered, audiences were amazed at this actor's ability to convey hunger, and then grief, and then lust. But what the audience didn't know was that these three shots were the same. Therefore, the magic happens from the interpretation.
He smiles. What is he now? The dirty old man. That's what film can do for you.
Modern art takes advantage of this effect. Marcel Duchamp placed a urinal in an art gallery and titled it Fountain. The urinal was just half the art piece. The other half was the gallery itself, a urinal inside an art gallery. Put them together and have spectators try to make the connection. What do you think Duchamp is trying to say? Cutting is a lot like placing a urinal inside an art gallery. In this social network, Fincher takes a scene of Zuckerberg creating the foundations of Facebook and cuts it with scenes of a final club. He lets us interpret that this is where Zuckerberg is at in his life, and this is where he wants to be. In The Godfather, Coppola doesn't tell us how Michael has changed. He shows us by cutting between scenes of Michael's son being baptized in holy water and Michael being baptized in rivers of blood. But all of these examples have something in common. They're not just cuts, they're crosscuts. Take multiple lines of action and cut between them. One line of action is the killer reacting to the doorbell. The second line of action is the FBI at the door. And then we're introduced to the third line of action.
Good afternoon.
And our expectations are subverted.
I'm looking for Mrs. Lippman's family.
I actually like to cross-cut. I like the different textures of different locations, sometimes even different times.
This is Nolan's remake of a Norwegian film, Insomnia. This scene is 70 seconds long and there's 39 shots, most of which are singles, most of which are shot with telephoto lenses. Watch this movie on your own and you'll notice two things. One, there's too many cuts. Two, they don't really tell you anything. We get single, 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 insert, single, single, insert, single. It gets kind of tiring. You can create a film with only composition and no cuts, at least no noticeable cuts. And it can work very well. But when you create a film with only cuts and no composition, you get jarring scenes like this. Here's the same scene from the original Insomnia. We get time to process what's going on. We do have to make the distinction that Nolan's strength with cutting comes from the crosscut. During the most emotional scene in The Dark Knight, Nolan makes sure to show us one line of action, Rachel's, and then crosscuts to Harvey. Then, after some filler, he crosscuts between Batman's line of action and Rachel's. He makes us think that these two lines of action are connected spatially. And then, at the climax of The Dark Knight, he crosscuts between no fewer than 7 lines of action before ending on this one. A tactic he'll take further in Inception, when he's not just cutting between lines of action, he's cutting between realities. For my money, Dunkirk is Nolan's best film, and it's a film designed solely around the crosscut. But first, let's go back 100 years. In this short film, D.W. Griffith cuts between 3 lines of action: the criminals trying to break into a woman's cabin, the woman trying to ward off the criminals, and the hero trying to rescue her. A century ago, Griffith realized something that Christopher Nolan would later adopt. You can use the crosscut to play around with the rate of change between lines of action. The criminals are moments away from breaking in, but the man is miles away. However, by cross-cutting, Griffith can make these two scenes move much slower than this one, so the hero can arrive just in time. 3 separate lines of action, cut together, all converging at the very end. Sound familiar? Not only has Nolan been able to create his unique style with cross-cutting, he's been able to use the crosscut to make films no one else has even thought of. Sometimes the very thing people criticize you for is what makes you unique.
He said style is the stuff that you get wrong. If you were actually playing the guitar perfectly, if you were making music perfectly, there would be no style.
Am I not in this?